Well, we don't like the idea that you are going to pretend that the tax is gone because effectively it is still in place, of course, until the 1st of July 2014. Secondly, the government has hitched the emissions trading scheme to the European scheme. And as Warwick McGivern said last night, if the Australian dollar goes down 30%, compared with the euro, then the carbon tax will go up, the emissions trading price will go up to $40 a tonne. And thirdly, the government just hasn't thought this properly through. I mean, Greg Combay belled the cat a few weeks ago when he said it's not simple to move from a carbon tax to an emissions trading scheme, but it's something more than that. The government has now announced a one-off $3.8 billion, but that will continue growing as part of the costs associated with it. And of that, $1.8 billion is coming from changes to fringe benefits tax for motor vehicles. Fran, people will only start to realise what this really means for the manufacturing industry in Australia and for the motor vehicle industry in Australia.
I'll come back to the motor vehicle industry, but in terms of the politics of this, and Tony Abbott's campaign for years now that this next election will be a referendum on the carbon tax, you've lost your main line of attack. Australia should not have a carbon tax. It's gone.
No, well, it is. It's just a carbon tax under a different name.
Well, no, it's not. It's a price on carbon. It's not a carbon tax.
Well, you know, you can say that, but the fact is the carbon tax is still there as it is defined as a carbon tax until 1st of July 2014. And after that, they go to an emissions trading scheme where they put a price on carbon, which effectively means that there is a financial penalty imposed by the government, by law, on businesses, a financial penalty imposed by the government, by law, on businesses. And that means someone has to pay it. And there will be revenue to the Commonwealth Government, and that constitutes a tax. Right?
Well, it's a market mechanism, the emissions trading scheme. It was first promised by the Howard government in 2007. In fact, 6 years ago today, on July 17, 2007, John Howard said this.
Today I'm announcing a cap and trade emissions trading system that will help Australia substantially lower our domestic greenhouse gas emissions at the lowest cost.
That was John Howard on this day 6 years ago. You didn't call it a tax then?
Well, he called them cap and trade, so he could call it whatever he wanted. But I mean, the bottom line was,
option.
Yeah, but I mean, the world was moving in that direction, and then Copenhagen clearly changed everything. And Kevin Rudd went and curled into the fetal position in Kirribilli House and pretended that the whole world was against him, and his entire greatest moral challenge of our time came to a shuddering halt. I mean, Kevin Rudd is a fake on these things. And it's not just the coalition calling him out, it's the Greens calling him out. The Greens are calling Kevin Rudd out as a fake. Because on the one hand, he says we need to put a price on carbon that penalises people that emit carbon dioxide. And that's the whole idea, that you penalise it. But on the other hand, he's trying to say, hey, look, we're giving families all this tax break. It doesn't stack up. He's trying to walk both sides of the fence.
Why doesn't that stack up if you're penalising the emitters?
Because what he's trying to pretend is by getting rid of the carbon tax and lowering the price of carbon, there is huge benefits to Australia. That's what he's trying to pretend. And it's not right, because if you put a price on carbon to penalise people, right, to change their behaviour. So by lowering the price of carbon, the argument goes, by lowering the price of carbon, you are effectively, lowering the incentive to change behaviour.
Okay, but both sides are talking about an incentive to change behaviour. I mean,
well, ours is direct action.
Yours is direct action, so that you buy carbon abatement under the direct action policy, I think is how I understand it correctly. Isn't the only difference is you're asking the taxpayer to foot that bill, not the polluters? Well,
we've got $3.2 billion
of taxpayers' money.
Allocated over 4 years to pay for our direct action plan. Under Labor, it's $58 billion over 8 years. $58 billion over 8 years. Because
but not coming from the taxpayer.
Of course it is. It's coming from, Citizen Australia is the same as a taxpayer. I mean, I know they seem different, but the same person...
One is the broad population, one is the industry's doing the emission, trying to get them to change their behaviour.
Where do you think they're passing it on, Frank? Come on, you know that. I mean, let's not pretend that somehow industry doesn't pass it on, because why would the Labor Party have all that compensation for households? So You know, let's not pretend that.
But it's all about trying to get behaviour change, isn't it? Under your direct action plan.
And ours, and
that's your plan too, to try and industries, as I understand it, that emit above a baseline will face a penalty, which is a price on carbon. When will you tell us how much that penalty will be?
Well, what we've said is that we're going to go in and buy abatement, and we're going, and that could be about, you know, we're going to have a reverse auction, and we're effectively going to go in and buy the very worst carbon dioxide emissions.
Sure.
That's what we're going to do right now.
But you've also got a penalty if industries keep raising their emissions.
Well, but effectively that's right, and you'll see the further details on that.
So that's a price on carbon, isn't it?
Well, no, it isn't a price on carbon, because we're asking them to change their emissions beforehand, and we're prepared to provide an incentive to help them to change their behaviour. This is the thing. It's direct action is something that's quite common around the world. In fact, it's a preferred methodology, as opposed to an emissions trading scheme. I'm a believer in markets, right? And I'd say to you, if you've got a global commodity and you want to have global trading in that commodity, you need to have consistent, predictable markets that have transparent attitudes. What this government is doing is it is effectively contracting out the future of the Australian economy to Brussels. Because what you're doing is you're asking Brussels to determine how you're going to change the behaviour of emitters in Australia.
But that's just an exaggeration. Brussels isn't the only one with an emissions trading scheme. There's 7 provinces, including Beijing, in China,
No,
California.
it's not an exaggeration.
They're all going to link ideally.
I ask you a question, Fran. I ask you a question, if I may. Isn't the government saying that they're going to link it to the European carbon price?
And link up to all the carbon prices.
Aren't they saying they're going to link it to European?
Under the John Howard scheme?
Well, no. Aren't they saying that they're going to link it to the Europeans? The answer is yes. They want to link it to the Europeans. And Greg Combet was negotiating with the Europeans. So the European price would effectively be the determinant of the Australian price, right? So therefore, now, as the European Parliament determines that they're going to pull back on permits for emission and try and inflate the price, that flows through to Australia. Right? Plus, we carry the currency risk, so that if there is a 30% drop in the Australian dollar against the euro, which is certainly possible, then our carbon price goes to $40 a tonne, even though Kevin Rudd's running around saying it'll be $6 a tonne. So these are the and hang on, Labor says they want us to have the Asian century, but they're linking our emissions trading scheme to Europe.
But they're also talking to China. You know that. China is introducing 7 schemes, including Beijing.
All free permits, Fran. All free.
As a pilot to moving towards an emissions trading scheme.
As a pilot. Come on. This is meant to happen now for Australia.
All right.
And as an energy-producing nation, as a nation that exports energy, we export coal. Labor stands up there and says, hey, guys, we're exporting coal. Isn't that great? But we don't want to use it ourselves.
So what's the coalition going to do long-term after 2020?
Well, we've said we'll be in negotiations with the world.